My name is Dean Miller. I'm the president and CEO of PACT. I also serve as the managing director of the PCOM Innovation Fund. I've been in the venture space for over 25 years. And this panel is all about funding and how it plays a role in the process that we're talking about throughout today. You all have in front of you the bios and names of my fellow panelists, and what I've asked them to do is not introduce themselves so much as introduce their firms. I'm going to start. 2 lines. PACT is an organization that really connects entrepreneurs, investors, and the whole ecosystem through a variety of ways. Capital is one of the primary things we focus on. I already mentioned I'm a VC. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague to the right.
Hi, everyone. I'm with Osage University Partners, which is a venture capital fund based just outside Philly in Bala Cynwyd. We invest in spin-outs from universities with $600 million under management and invest across stages and across sectors within the life sciences and tech.
Hello, everyone. Matt Plovlich with NewSpring. We're a multi-strategy growth equity fund. We invest in tech-enabled healthcare services, niche clinical providers, and specialty pharmaceuticals.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Nissenbaum. I'm the president and CEO of Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Just rolls off the tongue. If you look at us nationwide, we are the 9th most active seed investor in the nation. We focus only on the Philadelphia region. We make about 40 investments per year and have an active portfolio all within 1 hour of Philadelphia of about 240 technology companies across life sciences and information technology.
Repeat that stat just for a second. What is your rank nationally?
Nationally. So there are 4 Ben Franklin statewide. Our Ben Franklin here in Philadelphia is number 9 in the nation in terms of number of seed investments made if you ranked us as a VC fund nationwide. And it's also an organization that's been around doing it for more than 40 years. And so we're kind of the poster child for a collaboration between the public, so the governments, and the private markets to bring technologies to market for the better of both the region and hopefully the world.
That's a pretty impressive statistic. I'm not sure many people in this room would get that. So I'm going to set the table really quickly. Public markets, private markets, and then throw questions. But I want to ask you all, which I really can't see you all, to start prepping questions because we're going to go early and ask you to submit questions. All right, public markets. Why do we talk about public markets with life sciences? Anybody want to take that one? Why does it matter for us to talk about public markets? By the way, if we were in a tech panel, we really wouldn't be talking about public markets.
Yeah, I'll take it from our perspective at NewSpring. I mean, we're in a fundraise right now, quite frankly, and with the public markets the way they are, it really affects our investors. And when our investors are affected, it impacts the investments that we can make. So as the large institutional LPs look at their portfolios and the choppiness in the public markets, they withdraw capital from the venture and growth communities, and then that has an echo effect.
True. So the further truth of it is that life sciences companies, because of the size of capital that needs to be raised, particularly as they progress, require in most cases the public markets. So what's the public markets? We saw in mid-2021, a lot of sectors did as well, a high over years and years. And that fueled some significant IPO activity, some significant investment activity. Since that point, we are more than 30% off that high. IPOs have effectively dried up. It is not a healthy IPO market for life sciences, and there are a lot of companies out there that went public that are really struggling. That's kind of dismal, but it's the truth. It's where we stand. The IPO market in any market, but certainly in life sciences, tends to be cyclical. It's pretty closed right now. Let's talk about the private markets, venture capital. And this is going to be specific to Philadelphia, but it also applies beyond Philadelphia. You heard certainly Mr. Mahoney from Penn talk about, hey, I'm going to address Penn, but this applies to the whole region. I'm going to address Philadelphia, but it really applies to the whole country. 2021 was a high watermark in Philadelphia for venture capital investment, by far. We closed over $8 billion of transactions that included over 400 transactions. High watermark by a long way. And that was during COVID, when investors couldn't meet with a lot of companies. We rose up to 6th in the country. So we beat Scott's 9th in the country. So 6th in the country, and that included investments like Nyking Therapeutics at 200 million, Century, 160 million, Arrow, 90 million, and Interius, 76 million. Pretty significant fundraise. And by the way, out of that total, that $8 billion, roughly about 15-ish plus or minus percent was biotech. So 15%. Some of you might say, wow, that seems small. It doesn't include healthcare services, technology-enabled services, med tech, just bio. So 2022 has been a little bit of a rough year. However, through Q2, we are tracking higher than what we did through middle of 21, with over $3.8 billion invested in over 240 deals. That's good news. The bad news, it slowed. It slowed a lot, particularly at the end of Q2. And it includes companies like Castle Creek raising $125 million, Mineralis $118 million, Swan Bio $56 million. Remember, I told you biotech requires a lot of dough. All those deals show you that that certainly is the case. So where are we? You know, the clouds that have been over the public markets have absolutely started to crowd the private markets, making it harder to raise money. Scott, you're out there doing a lot of deals. You know, what do you see and hear, particularly from a biotech perspective, in terms of fundraising?
Well, I think you nailed it on the head. It's a lot of money. You know, having done this since 1998, I don't think I've ever seen a seed round at $100 million, $200 million. And when you're talking about cell and gene therapy in particular, that's the type of dollars, because it's an industry that really is on the forefront. So they need to build the facilities. They need to build the manufacturing. They need to build the tools to build the manufacturing, to build the facilities, to get the drugs, to be able to do the tests. And so you're talking about 100 million, 200 million, 500 million just out of the gate. And so that dominates here. That's why our stats are so good. I also have to throw it out. Philadelphia 2 years ago was ranked the fastest growing technology ecosystem in the world. We were tied with Tokyo. We're 15th in the US. That's a pretty amazing reminder of, on a Tuesday, 500 people can fill a room for a biotech conference in Philadelphia. So we're kind of in that heyday. There's a lot of capital that's necessary, and we're still importing 80% of that capital from outside the region.
Anurag, you spent a lot of time looking at the innovations that come out of institutions like was just represented on this stage across the country, across the world. How do you position, you know, the Philadelphia institutions with kind of the national and global view you have in partnerships? And you know, for those of you who don't know, Osage University partners with the top institutions across the globe.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, we are partnered with all the academic institutions around this area. So we see all the technologies coming. And to be honest, there is no difference versus here compared to like Boston and San Francisco that we always talk about as being hubs. I think what happens is, one thing that Philadelphia has done very well has created a niche in cell and gene therapy, which is the most upcoming area. And that will continue to shine in capital and in number of companies that are started in this area, and not for the last 2021, 2022. It'll go up and down, but it'll continue to increase. So I think that niche is going to be very critical, because there's a lot of facilities that are already being built, and that's going to increase the capacity of the future. That means more companies are going to start, you know, coming here because of those capabilities, and then researchers, because all the major researchers in this space are here, more researchers are going to get attracted to this space. So there's just a you know, kind of a snowball effect that has been started. Now, the capital, we have to keep in mind in two ways. That, you know, there is one technology that, you know, sometimes can move away from here, and still, but it's a technology from the Philadelphia neighborhood, which has happened for the longest, like forever, that a pen technology will move to Boston to form the company. But with this cell and gene therapy expertise that is being built, The technology is here, and the company has to be built because the facilities are here, and that's going to be the more differentiating factor than anywhere else. I think like more companies, as you talked about Century, all of these companies are coming to Philadelphia because they have the infrastructure here for this. So there is a double down that I think will happen in Philadelphia going forward as these become more mainstream for big pharma.
So once upon a time, Anurag, it absolutely happened that a company would receive a term sheet for investment and it would say, you need to move your company to Boston, or you need to move your company to San Francisco. Does that happen anymore?
It does, like for traditional modalities, like if you look at small molecule antibodies, where you really don't need a specialized facility. It becomes more about the management team, and those management teams have moved away from New Jersey, Philadelphia area to Boston and San Francisco. So they don't want to move. I mean, they don't want to move their kids from school, move it back to another region. So they stay there. So the companies get formed there. Now, if you take away for the cell and gene therapy, they have to move the company here, even if the technology is from Stanford. That has to move to Philadelphia because the facilities are here, the expertise are here, all the universities are building expertise. And so it's almost the other way, that now companies are going to move here no matter where they come from.
Scott?
And I just want to emphasize that. I mean, you got 128 universities within 1 hour of Philadelphia. So when you have the physical infrastructure here, we already have the growing talent, because you're not going to go out and get the experienced person that's worked for years on cell and gene. It doesn't exist. Like that person is doing that job now and will be the future of the experience. And so between the physical infrastructure that we're building, kudos to Philly for doing that, plus the talent we already have, it would be a missed opportunity for Philadelphia in this region not to be the dominant player in cell and gene therapy.
Let's continue with this infrastructure investment and discussion. And Matt, I want you to focus in, because you invest in a lot of services also around the life sciences sector. So yes, it's bricks and mortar, and we heard about that earlier today in terms of what a variety of institutions are doing to invest in that. And it's a great point that serves as a huge anchor, particularly with cell and gene therapy. Matt, extend that, right, to the multitude of different services organizations that you need to have, not necessarily in proximity, but serve as a really good magnet here in this region for biotech investment.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. And it's interesting. So we don't actually invest in the small molecules or any of the molecules. We invest in what I like to call the picks and the shovels of the gold rush. And really, to Dean's point, I mean, you look at the CROs, the CDMOs, everything in the ecosystem out there, and that's where we focus our time, energy, and effort. And what we've seen is there is a significant amount of capital going into those businesses. We had a deal that we looked at earlier this year that was a specialty market CRO, and just to give you examples, we put in a bid at 12 to 15 times EBITDA, which is a pretty rich valuation, and we didn't even get invited to the first round of the process. And the banker called us laughing and said, we had stuff with a 2 in front of it in terms of multiples. So I just think that as it snowballs, more of these service providers, the ones that exist and that are the size and the scale that we invest in, are going to get additional capital chasing off of them, and it just perpetuates the market and the ability of these companies to effectively spend those $100, $200 million seeds.
You can have anything in our portfolio for 12 times.
EBITDA, though, so...
We don't have any of those companies, sorry.
Do I have any takers?
No EBITDA.
12 EBITDA company.
One thing I'll add is for cell and gene therapy, these facilities are so critical to the success of it because you cannot easily switch. So, I mean, I can understand why they're going at such a big premium because, to be honest, we will spend half of our Series A dollars just making sure somebody can make that thing. And most of the companies fail, and the last 6-9 months in the public market is a very good thing. Clinical holds have been the biggest news that we have seen from cell and gene therapy companies. So I can understand why, I mean, the valuations are going on and why the Philadelphia, if you can build it here, it becomes a nexus.
All right, so we have science, we have infrastructure, a growing base of infrastructure, seed capital. Scott, you're number 9 in the country, but how many co-investors do you have that are based here to invest at a seed stage level or even pre-seed in a therapeutics company?
Very few. is the short answer. Although I think that's a universal truth. I think Philadelphia probably is a little exaggerated than that. If you do look, and the stat I said earlier, 80% of the investments in our companies comes from outside the region. And that is a natural pull away from the Philadelphia region. As long as we have some capital here, the companies stay here. But we always have that challenge. I think we are strong between the angel community like Broad Street Angels here at the Union League, the investors like NewSpring and Osage. But then the list gets pretty short. We're strong in private equity, but there's definitely the gap in funding from that Series A, which in cell and gene therapy is $100, $200 million round, to that Series C, where it's like, okay, we know this is now a success. How much of a success in it? And so that gap from A to C is really where we have to both import the capital and struggle to find the capital.
I see Lucas over there with Hatch Bio Fund, who's raising a fund, and I think there are a few others probably in this group. There is this view that you have to have a lot of local capital. Anurag, you invest around the country, around the world. What's your perspective on that?
I think, this goes back, I think what capital can come from different flavors. So if you're a later stage capital, I think the geography is less critical to you. If you're an early stage investor who's forming the company, geography becomes a little bit more critical, because if you're based in San Francisco, having everyday meeting becomes different. However, the pandemic has really changed the perspective on that. We made most of our capital deployment never meeting the company in person, never meeting the management in person. So I think that is kind of, it's going to change. And I think what will happen, for me, what I think is, people are going to see that this new modalities that are really driving the innovation in our field, the capital, the early stage capital is going to move in slowly here, and we'll need that one or two, maybe when they start their funds here to form companies, it's going to lead to a snowball effect that you will create talent that will bring in more capital. And I think we are just in the forefront of it by forming this new capability that doesn't exist. It's very hard to kind of suddenly rise in a lot of noise of small molecule and antibodies, but with this really differentiated view, I think Philadelphia will be in the start. And for me, the biggest sign was that SVB takes out a report every year of where, biggest regions of investments. And Philadelphia 2 years back started popping out one that they call out. And so this is the beginning of it. And I think the talent will attract the capital here slowly. But it does take time.
So capital is absolutely portable, right? And I gave you quite a few deals that got done over the past 18 months. Some of those were initial rounds of capital, right? So skip the couple $1 million seed round, go right to the $50+ million first round. And again, in order for that to happen, you've got to have people coming from all over. So shout out to the audience. We have Q&A coming up, yes? All right, so get your questions ready and start raising your hands. And I'm going to remind my panelists that they need to close with their favorite biotech deal. All right, reminders. Any questions in the audience? Over here.
Thank you. My question is, based off the investments that have been done in the city of Philadelphia, can you give a round number of how many have been invested in minority companies? And then on top of that, what are some of the things that you're looking at to close that gap between pre-seed and seed investment for minority companies when we don't have those traditional networks of family and angel funding and access to investors?
Great question. You stole one of the things, Tia, that I was going to cover. And that is the fact that all investing, but let's focus because this is all about biotech, needs more diversity. Women, people of color, et cetera. And we have a growing base of really successful female entrepreneurs, but I can't speak broadly to the diversity. I'm going to answer your question in a second. It includes Joan Lau from Spiravant, Suzanne and Karen from Arrow, Margaret Haber, your colleague at Osage, Jen Hart, Scott's colleague at Ben Franklin. Tia, you were on that list too. But we are not where we need to be. We as an organization partner with PitchBook to produce data for Philadelphia. I've been asking them for years, which they have not gathered, on minority data. They do have gender data that they've started to publish, which shows that actually Philadelphia is one of the leaders above the national average in terms of investment in women entrepreneurs. Still way, way farther to go. And I'm a big believer, and I'm point out or ask the panel here that we need to start really early in terms of the pipeline at the K-12 level, as well as the higher education level. And we have a variety of programs pointed at that to improve the pipeline of diverse entrepreneurs.
And we represent an index of the early stage market in Philadelphia. And I will start with, we have a lot of work to do when it comes to diversity and expanding our portfolio, especially given the population of Philadelphia. Having said that, if you look at historical averages, I think the SBA says it's like 7%. And our historical average was closer to 20. Last year, 60% of the investments we made were either led by a person of color or a woman. Which, again, lots of work, and you're catching up on that, and we spend a lot of time and energy in that given who we serve and the populations that we serve. So progress, still a lot of work to be done.
Other questions?
So, hi, Bob Castellucci, Partnership for Prosperity. You're right, it takes a lot of money. And what's kind of interesting about cell and gene is there aren't decades of experience where people develop their skills, that kind of thing. So all the innovation at the leading edge hopefully is going to lead to lots of needs for people to do work at very basic levels where that work hasn't been around forever. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how VC thinks about investment in education, in preparing workforce in ways that maybe are a little bit different than having to go to college or that sort of thing. Is there a place in the VC world to invest in workforce development?
Well, Dean, I think you're great. I mean, from PCOM, what they're doing with their organization.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I run a fund with the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and they're very much focused on inclusivity and diversity and access in particular from a healthcare perspective. And again, it starts with recruitment. In terms of investment, though, that's a large academic institution, right? Penn, Science Center, PIDC, Chamber, all putting real money and efforts into investment. Your question was specifically targeting whether venture would invest in that. I don't see a plethora of scalable models, for-profit models for venture to invest in that. It tends to be more nonprofit. We're launching an apprenticeship program that will be focused on lab-based and recruiting majority underrepresented. There are other organizations, in fact, the Science Center, Wistar, et cetera, just launched a program. So your point is spot on. We need more of it. And yeah, there's no one single solution. There needs to be more of it done and focused. I'm not sure that's a venture, specifically a venture investment.
Maybe not a direct venture investments, but in at least these cutting edge technologies, what we are seeing is a lot of hiring is happening directly from the universities, whether they work at university systems or graduate students or undergraduate students. So indirect, which I don't see much in small molecule and antibodies, where you're seeing much more experienced people available. So in a way, if go back to the large academic institutions which have built this, and if that ground up the talent is being built there, I think the VC-backed companies are going to provide them opportunities beyond that academic opportunity that will slowly kind of pull up talent from the bottom. But the infrastructure needs to be built by multiple other nonprofit ways, because there are not venture-backable ways right now.
Yeah, and I think an interesting way, if you look at the marketplace, I think it's going to be incumbent upon the companies themselves. And we look at human capital management as a thesis area that we're focusing a lot of time and energy on. And there's companies that are popping up that are selling directly to the providers, the cell and gene therapy companies themselves. And they need to purchase those modules to support those businesses. And it needs to be that public-private partnership that's really going to grow that next generation of workforce.
Anurag's colleague who runs the fund, Mark Singer, is the co-chair of Greenlight, which is investing in these models, nonprofit models, to bring them to Philadelphia to change that landscape. So there's lots of ways for us as leaders to get involved that's not putting for-profit investments into the community. Other questions? Again, I apologize, I can't see.
Please announce your company and name before asking your question. Thanks.
Kathy Bruner from Acumen Analytics. One of the things I think is important as we talk about a lot of this stuff, and I'm wondering about your kind of thoughts on this, is Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods and counties, so we span a very large geographic area, and I know that all of you have locations that are spread about, and incubation centers are being funded all over. So just, I guess, talk maybe a little bit about maybe the 5-county area strategy for those investments and centers where you might find those innovation locations.
Thanks, Kathleen. I'll go beyond the 5-county. How about 13, right? You have to include Delaware, you got to include South Jersey as part of what we affectionately refer to as the Philadelphia MSA.
No, you don't.
Scott doesn't care about those, but I do. And the assets are significant. Scott, you want to talk about just the 5-county area that you focus on?
So Ben Franklin was created in 1983 by the state of Pennsylvania. So we, along with our other Bens, cover each county in Pennsylvania. We only, in southeastern Pennsylvania, cover Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, Delaware, and Philadelphia County. And I'll just say, if you look historically, the suburbs, when I started in the 2000s, kind of role, they were dominant. And if you look today, Philadelphia County for us represents about 60% of the investments we make, total. So the other 4 make up the other 40%. And so you are seeing a flight into the city. I think that's a generational issue. I think it's an infrastructure issue. I think it's where the place in the incubation. But if you look at the 5 counties, I think we're doing a pretty good job. You've got the biotech center up in Bucks County with Lou. You've got IC at 301. You've got what they're building in Schuylkill Yards. You've got the Navy Yard that's about to build 6 million square feet. You've got what Discovery's Lab's doing out in King of Prussia. And so, especially in bio, I think we're hitting it. We're hitting it pretty well. Could you do more? Absolutely. But it isn't just Philadelphia. It's pretty well spread, especially in the biotech world.
There's a lot of building going on in University City, no doubt about it, and that's catching a lot of that innovation coming out of the universities, predominantly in the city, which I think is important. One of our strengths is our geographic diversity. It's also a little bit one of our weaknesses because it makes it hard to create that Kendall Square-like concentration because we have such great assets around the region. I think we need to embrace those assets, connect them. It's, one of the things certainly we do, but it is, I think it's a real strength, and all of those regions are experiencing it. It's not just University City. And Scott mentioned a whole bunch of them. Any other perspectives? How much time we have left? 9 minutes. All right, lots of questions.
Many of you that know me know that I'm a runner, so please wait for me to get there before asking your question. And again, please.
Yep, thank you. Jim Daly with CRB. Actually, guys, following up on that previous comment, speaking to the kind of notorious relationship between Harrisburg and Philadelphia, how much do you guys see that handicapping the region, that there isn't a real cohesive and strong sort of initiative that some other parts of the country can sort of put together and put some real money and substance behind, sort of supporting this sort of industry?
Can we take it?
I guess I'm going to have to take this one. I mean, Harrisburg has been wildly supportive for over 40 years for the Ben Franklin partnerships. And so just speaking for myself, there is no other public-private partnership that I'm aware of that has lasted 40 years that has had the impact. Again, I've only been CEO for 2 years, so I can't take credit for what happened for the last 38. But, and so I think it's impressive. I think if you look at what they're doing right now in terms of the funding and what they're doing from the state, the Treasury and SSBCI will have an influx of capital. The EDA has an influx of capital. The NIH has an influx of capital. The state budget, Ben Franklin's budget was actually increased for the first time in 13 years this year. It was a small increase, but that's positive momentum going into what is right now a very excited market here in Philadelphia for technology and innovation. And so I think Harrisburg is carrying their weight. I think it's, there's always room for more. And, when you compare us to other states, New York throws $500 million at it, Boston throws $500 million at it, we throw $15 million at it. Again, but our dollar for dollar return on that, the state has received $4 back in wage and tax revenue. $4 back for every dollar they've given us over a 30-year average. It's a good return for them. It's a good return on the jobs and the impact. It's a good opportunity for us. And frankly, the technologies we're creating, which we'll talk about here at the end, it's incredible the impact it could have on everyone's lives, not just those of Philadelphia.
Listen, I think it'd be great to have leadership more focused on the space. We need a plan around that, and I'm hopeful, come fall or next year that we will get there. But the truth is that Philadelphia had a real head start on a lot of geographies, and those geographies made big, splashy headlines. And New York's a great one. Nancy Mitchell, this is not a pot shot. New York was not a biotech center at a time when Philly was thriving in biotech. New York put really focused state and city capital at it and have transformed that industry over the past decade plus. We could have done that. We already had a big base. But we certainly, I think, from a state perspective, have underinvested. But in terms of private capital, in terms of capital coming in from outside the area, we're still a significant player. We had a question over here, I think. I saw a gentleman grab the mic. It'll go on normally. You don't need to touch it. They'll hit it.
Thank you. Hi, Clifford Breckner from Collier's Life Sciences Practice Group. I'm curious if you have any data around how much capital that is raised in Greater Philadelphia ends up leaving the region for picks and shovels companies, whether in North Carolina, China, Boston, wherever it may go.
Are you talking about capital raised here by a venture
By
fund that invests outside the area, or the companies that are created here pick up and leave?
Actually, the companies that outsource their CRO, CDMO work. How much of that is leaving the region?
Any perspective?
I think, from our perspective, when we looked at companies, there haven't been many what we call growth or later stage businesses that are in the picks and shovels business yet here. There's kind of a barbell, very early, very, very large, and we invest in the in-between. So where we've spent a lot of our time is quite frankly out of the region, but I think it's as we look at the ecosystem, how it's evolving, how it will continue to evolve. I think in the next 2 to 4 years, there's going to be a lot of additional investments in that capacity in those businesses, and it's from a personal perspective, I live here, I work here, I want to invest here. It's just easy on me to be able to meet with a CEO or a management team. But to Anurag's point, COVID taught us that you don't have to physically be in front of a management team. You can invest anywhere, and we've done that. So it's a preference, but I think it's a matter of the size and the stage of the businesses and just where we are in this marketplace today.
The specificity of your question, that data doesn't exist, right? Because it's what corporations are spending with third parties. I would tell you that just from awareness of the size and scope of our community, more dollars stay here and go to those third parties than elsewhere because of the preponderance of companies that do that work outside of those firms. But again, stripping away that data would be quite the challenge.
Thank you.
Maybe just to add, if I look at just our companies, I would say the companies that are moving here for the infrastructure are doing the third parties here because the infrastructure is here. I would more say that the companies in Boston and San Francisco are outsourcing more out of the state. And for small molecule and antibodies, it's not you're competing with the US, you're competing internationally of outsourcing. So even just my gut sense from our portfolio would say that if the dollars are here, they stay here more. And if they go, they don't go to somewhere else in the US, but it's more of the international outsourcing.
Anurag, let me ask you a question. You know, cell and gene therapy, right? It is the buzzword. Is it here to stay, right? We've all seen different technologies come and go or evolve, let's say. What's your perspective? Again, you know, as a scientist in your own right, look at things, like I said, around the globe. Is cell and gene therapy here to stay? Are we well positioned as Philadelphia?
Oh, absolutely. I think Big Pharma has made sure that this is one part of their innovation that they have all their hands and feet into. And I think the way lymphoma practice has transformed, it's been amazing. And the poster child of why it is here to stay, if you look at how the CAR Ts had started in lymphoma, was in third line. And right now, the idea is that it could move in first line by replacing transplants. Transplants have been here for like 50, 100 years. To be able to, for a therapy, no small molecular antibody therapy has ever replaced that, but the gene, like cell therapy has. And I think that transformation, like practice changing, practice disrupting effects are gonna come from these really innovative technologies, not by tweaking the small molecules or the antibodies, from my perspective. So I totally believe now, yes, the thing that we'll see is it's gonna wax and wane. The hype of, or the trough of gene therapy we saw in 2000s came with the hype in 2015. We are seeing some lull again because these are new things we are learning. Antibodies went through the same thing. Protein therapeutics went through the same thing. I think these will have waxed and waned because we'll learn what are the challenges, we'll improve them. But I'm 100% sure for cell and gene therapy that they will be the mainstay of our healthcare system. One thing that we don't focus on is the reimbursement of that and the payment, and I think that will be another battle that we will see as it goes into more broader population, like regenerative therapies, where more patients aren't going to need this than oncology, which becomes a handful of patients only.
Now you're beyond the scope of our panel. All right, so we are at the end, and I'm going to ask, starting with Scott, favorite Philadelphia biotech?
Such an easy answer. So we spun a technology out of Temple, had the privilege of working with a professor who was an expert in HIV, working with a genetics expert. And they went ahead and snipped HIV out of the human genome. Now, when I say that out loud, it sounds like one of those science fiction books that I enjoy, where they essentially made human beings immune to HIV. And in theory, the platform can do that for any virus. They raised $105 million, including $25 million from the NIH, and they are in clinical trials right now to cure HIV and hepatitis using cell and gene therapy, with the idea that if it works, identifying where the virus attaches to the genome, snipping it out, and we are now immune to that particular virus. I mean, that is some crazy stuff about what that means for society and technology and healthcare and life expectancy. I mean, you start to step back and you're like, all right, let's just not get too excited about that one. Let's just see what happens. So,
good one.
Well, I'm going to make you angry, Dean, because I'm going to say basically any company that is able to control their manufacturing. I think we've seen from COVID how critical that is, and it's just far too often we are seeing companies that are dependent upon outsourced resources that come into capital troubles or whatever it may be, and not having that control of manufacturing is just critical as a company continues to grow. So
probably one of the reasons Roche Spark are dumping $500 million in West Philly. Anurag.
Tough question, deciding which kid is smarter of our own portfolio.
If you take mine, I'm going to kill you.
I would say, like, for me, one of the investments that I have made has been in Interius Biotherapeutics. And the reason being that, CAR Ts are limited because of the time it takes to make them, and some patients don't have that time. And this therapy can make CAR Ts within your body without that downtime, and really can expand the number of patients who can benefit from it. And so again, CAR Ts will change the practice, and will change CAR T with this company.
All right, mine is a company you haven't heard of. It's called Hula, like in hula hoop. It is about to be the latest spin out from CHOP, from Dr. John Maris's lab, who's been serving kids with cancer for years. and in many ways curing them, but killing the kid because of the side effects from the small molecules that are used. So they are taking a unique approach with a novel antibody path combined with CAR T to cure cancer in kids. Not a lot of money put into pediatric cancer, and that is my favorite story. With that, we're at the end. Thank you, Mitchell and Nancy, for all you're doing, for putting this together. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day.